sick millionaire begs his virgin maid to spend the night with him because the sky over New York that morning was covered in a thin layer of gray clouds, mirroring the mood of Claire Bennett as she stood before the wrought iron gate of the old brownstone tucked away in the Upper West Side, just a few blocks from Central Park. Wearing a beige trench coat and a pair of worn flats, Claire clutched her bag tightly and took a deep breath. She had been preparing for this interview all week. As a cardiac care nurse with 2 years of ICU experience, she knew this opportunity, becoming a private nurse for a high-profile patient, could completely change her life and her mother's. At 27, Claire lived with her mother in a small apartment in Brooklyn. Her father had passed away when she was a child, and her mother, a public elementary school teacher, had worked tirelessly to provide for her. Every step Claire took in her career wasn't just for herself. It was a tribute to her mother's sacrifices. She rang the bell. The gate slowly opened, revealing a woman in her 60s with a straight posture and hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress and carried herself with composed elegance. "Good morning, I'm Claire Bennett. I have an interview scheduled with Mr. Nathan Hale at 9 a.m. Please come in. I'm Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Hale's housekeeper. He's expecting you in the library." Claire stepped inside onto a quiet garden scattered with autumn leaves. Her footsteps fell softly on the stone path. The 3-story brownstone stood solemn and timeless. Inside, dark wood interiors, aging oil paintings, and towering bookshelves gave the home a hushed reverence, as if time had slowed down here. They stopped before a large wooden door at the end of the hallway. "Mr. Nathan, Miss Bennett is here. Send her in." The voice was hoarse, deep, and soft, like breath wrapped in shadows. Nathan Hale sat behind a large oak desk. He was in his early 40s, wearing a gray turtleneck and a thin scarf. His face, though still handsome with the elegance of a seasoned writer, bore the visible signs of illness: pale skin, sunken eyes, and a labored breath. "Please have a seat. I don't like long interviews, so let's get straight to the point." Claire sat down, keeping her gaze steady despite the nerves tightening in her chest. Sitting before her was a man once renowned across New York for his psychologically layered novels. Now he looked drained, yet carried a peculiar air of control. "I read your resume. Solid experience, non-smoker, no family ties. I need someone who can stay full-time and isn't afraid of death." That last word made Claire pause for a heartbeat. "I worked in the ICU, Mr. Hale. I know exactly what end-stage heart failure looks like. But I believe this job isn't just about the condition. It's about the person." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. For the first time, his gaze softened. He didn't say another word, just gave her a small, silent nod. The silence in the library remained unbroken, except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. Nathan leaned back gently against the chair, one hand resting on his chest as if trying to control his breathing. "I have dilated cardiomyopathy, diagnosed 3 years ago. I've been through every treatment protocol available, but now my heart is giving up. I'm on the transplant list, but no one can say when, if ever, that call will come." Claire nodded, her expression professional, but never cold. She had seen many patients in the ICU with the same condition. Still, hearing it spoken aloud by the patient himself in such a calm and resigned tone made her chest tighten slightly. "So my main responsibilities would be monitoring medication and vitals?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "And sometimes, when I'm too weak, I'll need help walking or eating. Nothing extreme. I have a private physician and Mrs. Whitmore handles everything else." Claire opened her notebook and began jotting down notes. Nathan watched her quietly, as if studying her, then suddenly asked, "You're young. Why choose a job like this? Isn't it confining?" Claire looked up, answering simply, I chose this profession because I want to be there for people when they need someone the most. I don't feel confined. I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to do." There was a brief pause. "There's one thing I need to make clear," Nathan said, his tone slower now. "I won't accept pity. I know I'm dying, but I won't be treated like a man who's already dead." Claire gave a faint smile, not out of politeness but understanding. Many of her past patients wanted only one thing, to retain their dignity. "I'm not here to pity you, Mr. Hale. I'm here to help you live as well as you possibly can. Nothing more, nothing less." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then let out a soft chuckle. "That's the best answer I've heard yet." He stood up slowly and extended his hand. "If you're ready, you can start on Monday. Mrs. Whitmore will walk you through the house and daily routines." Claire shook his hand. It wasn't firm, but it was warm and sincere. As she stepped out of the library, Nathan added, his voice more subdued, "Thank you for not looking at me like I'm already gone." Claire turned back, locking eyes with him. "Because you're not, Mr. Hale. You're a man who's still fighting, and that deserves respect." And so, on a breezy Monday morning, Claire stepped through the gate of the brownstone once more, this time not as a job candidate, but as the private nurse to a man quietly suspended between time and fading light. Mrs. Whitmore led her upstairs to the second floor, where a small room had been prepared. It was simple but warm. A single bed by the window overlooking the garden, a desk, and an old bookshelf. The room carried a silence so profound it felt as though time itself moved slower there. The house ran on a structured routine. Nathan rose at 7, had breakfast at 7:30. Claire would monitor his vitals before and after meals, manage his medications, and occasionally assist with walking or garden strolls if his condition allowed. On her first morning, Claire knocked on his door. Nathan was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed in a dark robe. His eyes looked tired, but seemed to brighten ever so slightly when she entered. Their initial interactions were quiet, almost clinical. Claire worked efficiently and gently, checking vitals, organizing pills, recording notes in her small notebook without unnecessary conversation. Nathan didn't speak much, but he watched her closely. Something in his gaze, curious, cautious, suggested he was measuring the presence of a stranger in a world he had sealed off long ago. Breakfast was served in the ground floor dining room, where Mrs. Whitmore had laid out a light meal according to his dietary needs. Claire sat across from him, keeping a respectful but not distant posture. As he sliced into an apple, he asked casually about her family. She told him about her mother in Brooklyn, a schoolteacher, that her father had died when she was little. Her voice was even, honest, not dramatic, just real. Nathan grew quiet afterward. His eyes drifted toward the garden window. Claire sensed that her story had stirred something dormant in him. The days that followed moved in a steady rhythm. Claire worked with the calm precision of someone used to the fragility of life. Nathan, for his part, remained stoic, never complained, never asked for more than was necessary. Still, in small moments, an afternoon when she brought books to the library, a morning when he felt well enough to walk briefly in the garden, they began to build something quiet between them. Not a friendship, not yet, but a rhythm, a familiarity, a shared silence that felt less empty with each passing day. Then one evening, as Claire reorganized his medications, Nathan began to speak. He spoke of his years traveling for writing, of endless book signings, of a mother who had raised him alone after his father's death. His voice was subdued, not nostalgic, not emotional, just someone peeling back layers that had long gone untouched. Claire didn't interrupt. She listened, and in his words she heard not just stories, but what had been left unsaid for years: regret, solitude, and the creeping fear of a man once too proud to admit vulnerability. She didn't comfort him. She didn't advise. She simply stayed, quiet, present, like a steady heartbeat holding space in the fragile pause between life and loss. Rain fell steadily through the night. Outside the brownstone, it tapped relentlessly against the windows, like a melancholic rhythm playing on repeat. Inside, the house was still, cloaked in sleep and low hallway lights. Claire awoke at 3 a.m. to the sharp beeping of the emergency alert from Nathan's monitor. She didn't hesitate. Throwing on a coat, she ran down the hall toward his room. The door swung open to reveal Nathan slumped in the armchair by his bed, clutching his chest, his breathing shallow and erratic. His skin was pale, his forehead beaded with sweat. Kneeling beside him, Claire felt for his pulse. It was chaotic, rapid, and weak. His blood pressure had plummeted. This wasn't a warning sign. This was a full-blown heart failure episode. She reached for her stethoscope, checked his lungs, and gently called to him. "Nathan, can you hear me? I need you to stay with me." Deep breaths. He nodded faintly, unable to speak. Claire administered an emergency vasodilator, her hands moving swiftly, her focus razor-sharp. With the other hand, she called for an ambulance. Every move was instinctual, a rhythm born from years spent standing between life and loss. 12 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Claire rode with him, sitting at his side, gripping his hand as though her touch could tether him to the present. Through labored breaths, he whispered, If I don't make it." Claire squeezed his hand tighter, firm and unwavering. "Don't. You will. I won't let you go." At the hospital, the ER team took over immediately. Claire relayed his condition, the medications administered, the vitals, quick, clear, precise. Claire didn't leave the hospital that night. She stayed beside Nathan in the quiet ICU room where the rhythm of ventilators and heart monitors echoed like a quiet beat inside emotions that had yet to be named. The soft white light cast across his pale face made him look both fragile and strangely peaceful. No one had asked her to stay. No rule required it. But she stayed, not as a nurse bound by duty, but as someone who simply couldn't walk away from the person lying unconscious in front of her. She adjusted his blanket, checked his IV, then settled into the chair beside his bed. Sometimes she just sat silently, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Other times she bowed her head in quiet prayer. Each passing hour was a small victory of hope, subtle but real. By 4 a.m., Nathan had stabilized. He was still in critical condition, but breathing better with oxygen and IV meds. Claire sat in the hallway, her back against the wall, staring at the closed ICU doors. When the attending physician emerged, she stood up. "He's stable for now. You acted fast, Nurse Bennett. That likely saved his life." Claire only nodded. There was no pride in her chest, only a silent ache, where fear and affection had begun to blur. When Nathan was moved to a private ICU room, Claire followed. No one could convince her to leave. Mrs. Whitmore called, concerned, but Claire simply said she was exactly where she needed to be. Near dawn, as Nathan shifted slightly in restless sleep, Claire instinctively reached for his hand, holding it gently, just enough so that, even in unconsciousness, he would not feel alone. "Claire?" His voice was barely a whisper. She woke instantly, as if on reflex from years of ICU conditioning. "I'm here." "You didn't leave?" She shook her head, a soft smile flickering beneath weary eyes. "I promised I'd stay, and I did." And when he opened his eyes again that morning, the first thing he saw was her. There was no longer caution in his gaze, no trace of formal distance between patient and caregiver. In his eyes was something softer, trust, quiet and deep, the kind of trust given only to someone who stays when it matters most. Claire smiled faintly, and for the first time, Nathan smiled back, not out of politeness, but from genuine gratitude. Bathed in the pale morning light and the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, they said nothing more. But in that silence, something between them had shifted, permanently. After that fateful night, something shifted, quietly, without drama, as if an invisible door between Claire and Nathan had opened just enough to let in a sliver of light. Nathan began to speak more, not in long conversations, but enough for Claire to sense that he was growing used to her presence. One early morning, Nathan sat in the library, his gaze fixed on the misty garden beyond the window. Claire had just poured him a cup of tea when he suddenly spoke, as though he'd been thinking about it all week. "You mentioned your mother. Why don't you invite her to have lunch with us sometime?" Claire was momentarily surprised, then smiled. "I think she'd be nervous. She's never been in a place like this." "Then let her know this place feels warm, because you're here." A week later, on a gentle Sunday afternoon, Mrs. Rose Bennett arrived at the brownstone. She wore an old navy blue dress, neatly pressed, her hair pulled into a tidy bun. Her hands clutched a small leather purse as she stepped into the hallway. Claire greeted her with a warm hug. "Breathe, Mom. He's very kind." Nathan welcomed her with a calm, courteous smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Bennett. Claire speaks very highly of you." "Thank you for trusting her." Lunch was simple but thoughtful. Mrs. Whitmore served vegetarian lasagna, Claire's favorite, alongside a fresh salad and chamomile tea. During the meal, Nathan asked Mrs. Rose about her years as a teacher, her students, and what it was like raising a daughter alone in a city that never rested. She was hesitant at first, but Nathan's sincerity gradually melted away her reserve. When he spoke of how Claire always seemed to appear right when he needed her most, her eyes shimmered with quiet pride. After lunch, Claire led her mother into the garden for a short walk. Roses bloomed under the soft afternoon sun. Mrs. Rose held her daughter's hand and looked at her the way only a mother could, with gentleness, understanding, and something deeper this time. "You're in love, aren't you?" Claire froze slightly, her head bowed. "Mom, You don't have to say it. I see it in the way you look at him. There's something in your eyes I've never seen before." Claire sat down on a wooden bench beneath the old oak tree, her hands clenching the fabric of her dress. "I don't know how to feel. He's my patient, and I'm the one caring for him." Mrs. Rose sat beside her, her voice soft. "There is a boundary, yes, but not all boundaries are meant to keep feelings out. You can remain professional, but your heart is your own." Claire looked up, her eyes glistening. "I know, but he's very sick. He might not make it. If I let myself love him, and then lose him?" Silence. Then her mother gently squeezed her hand. "It's better to love once and hurt than to go a lifetime never knowing what love truly feels like." Claire didn't respond aloud, but deep inside she knew her mother was right. Her mother's words still echoed in Claire's mind as she returned to the brownstone that afternoon. She had no idea that just hours later her heart would be forced to choose between the safety of silence and a confession that could change everything. Around 6 p.m., the landline in the library rang. Claire reached for it, but Nathan stood up, slowly, deliberately. A rare call he wanted to take himself. It was Dr. Sanders, his personal physician. And the news was what they'd been waiting for over the past months. A matching donor heart had been found. The donor was a 29-year-old man who had passed away in a traffic accident. His family had agreed to donate his organs. Claire stood frozen by the window, sensing the shift in the room, hope and fear coiling together, life and fate colliding. On the ride to the hospital, Nathan remained silent. Claire sat beside him, holding his hand, not speaking either. But when the ambulance stopped at the ER doors, he turned to her, his eyes no longer guarded, but filled with quiet emotion. If I don't wake up after this surgery, there's something I need to say." Claire didn't answer. She simply squeezed his hand. "You've changed my life. You've made me believe I could love again. And if this is the last face I ever see, I want it to be yours." Those words broke something loose inside her. Claire tried to stay composed, but her voice trembled as she replied, "You don't get to say your last words yet, Nathan, because I haven't said my first." She took a deep breath, as if every word had been waiting its turn to be spoken. "I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you talked about your mother, or when you called my name in your sleep, or maybe it was the moment I realized I wasn't just your nurse. I was someone who needed you to live." Nathan's eyes welled with tears. He reached up to gently touch her cheek, his face trembling, whether from emotion or fear, no one could tell. And then they kissed. A first kiss full of tears and promise, not loud, but certain. "I'll come back," Nathan whispered, "not just for the new heart, but for you." The surgery began at 9 p.m. Claire was asked to wait outside, in what would become her entire world for the next 12 hours. She sat in the waiting room, surrounded by cold lights and hard plastic chairs, clutching the worn scarf Nathan used to wear on chilly mornings. Time passed. Or stood still. It was hard to tell. Claire closed her eyes and let the memories rush in. Her first day at the brownstone, the way he said, "I won't accept pity." The first time he smiled when she brewed the tea just right. Their quiet mornings in the garden, his voice as he spoke about the unfinished novel. Each memory returned like a slow-spinning reel of film. And now she didn't just hope he'd survive. She hoped he'd live fully, with a new heart, and a love not yet fully bloomed. And then came the longest night of her life, the night that would determine whether all they had shared was memory or the beginning of forever. The surgery lasted 11.5 hours. When Dr. Sanders stepped out of the operating room, exhaustion on his face but a quiet triumph in his eyes, Claire shot up from her seat. He spoke only one sentence. The transplant was a success. Claire burst into tears, this time from relief. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope, without fear. Nathan was transferred to the ICU. He remained unconscious for the first 3 days, under sedation and exhaustion. Claire stayed with him alongside the medical team, monitoring every reading, every breath. On the morning of the 4th day, he opened his eyes. Claire had fallen asleep, slumped over the edge of the bed, her hand still holding his. When she felt his fingers gently squeeze, she awoke instantly. "Nathan?" He couldn't speak yet, but gave a faint nod. There was light in his eyes again, weak but unmistakably alive. Claire smiled through her tears. "You did it. Your new heart is beating, and you're still here." He furrowed his brow, managing a whisper. "You're still here." She leaned forward, resting her forehead gently on his hand. "I told you I would be." Recovery took nearly a month. Nathan slowly relearned how to breathe deeply, walk without help, eat fully, and sleep through the night without waking in pain. Claire was with him every step, not just as a nurse, but as a constant part of his new rhythm of life. They spent time reading together in the library, listening to classical music in the afternoons, tending to the garden on sunny days. Small acts, yet they carried immense meaning now. When Nathan was finally discharged, the brownstone felt transformed. Mrs. Whitmore had filled it with flowers, rearranged the furniture just slightly, as if welcoming someone new home. Claire helped him settle onto the sofa by the fireplace. She fluffed the pillow behind his back, her hands moving with the familiarity of daily care. For a moment, they sat in silence, the kind that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Nathan watched the flicker of the firelight in her eyes and realized he no longer feared tomorrow. "Welcome home," she whispered. Nathan took her hand, his eyes brighter than she'd ever seen. "Claire, this isn't home anymore if you're not in it. Would you let this be ours from now on?" Claire froze for a heartbeat. Her chest tightened, not from surprise, but from a quiet certainty she'd tried not to admit. Nathan smiled softly and pulled out a small velvet box from his robe pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring, elegant, understated, like him. "I can't wait any longer. Life gave me a second chance, and I want to spend it with the woman who saved mine." Claire's voice caught in her throat. Her heart, once guarded by years of responsibility, now broke open to something terrifying and true. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, I will." They embraced in the golden light of the setting sun, in the very room that once held only silence, now full of love finally spoken aloud. No grand speeches, no audience, just two people, and two hearts, old and new, beating in perfect rhythm. And so, after everything they had faced, they began writing a new chapter, no longer colored by illness or loss, but by the gentle hues of spring, with a love strong enough to bloom amid life's most fragile moments. On a soft spring morning, the garden behind the hale brownstone bloomed in gentle shades of white, lavender, and pale gold. The very flower beds Claire and Nathan had tended during his recovery now blossomed in full, like their love, born from pain and nurtured with patience. The wedding took place where they had once strolled in the early misty mornings, where they had paused beneath the old maple tree to share secrets and silences. Now that very spot was transformed, an arch wrapped in wildflowers, white chairs arranged in a semicircle, and a petal-strewn path as delicate as breath. There weren't many guests, only those who truly mattered. Rose, Claire's mother, was there. Mrs. Whitmore, the housekeeper who had witnessed every turning point. Dr. Sanders, the man who had guarded Nathan's heartbeat. A few lifelong friends from both sides completed the circle. It wasn't formal. It was warm, intimate, like a family gathering with deeper meaning. Nathan stood beneath the floral arch, wearing a simple charcoal suit, his eyes never leaving the figure walking toward him. Claire wore an ivory dress, elegant, understated, like her. In her hands she carried a bouquet of garden flowers, the same ones Nathan once said, "Look just like you, gentle and unassuming." As she reached him, Nathan took her hand, his eyes reflecting a sky that had just cleared after a long storm. The officiant spoke only briefly, then invited them to share their vows. Nathan looked into Claire's eyes, voice steady and low. "You came into my life when I thought it was nearing its end. You didn't just help me survive. You taught me how to love, how to hope, how to believe in tomorrow. I promise I won't waste a single heartbeat because you gave it a reason to keep going." Claire smiled through tears, replying softly, "You entered my life like winter wind, cold, honest, unrelenting. And from you, I learned how to warm my own soul with love. I promise to stay by your side on days of strength and days of weakness, because I don't just love your heart. I love the man who chose to live again, for me." Applause followed as they were pronounced husband and wife. This kiss was no longer a promise, it was a beginning, a step forward on a path that would no longer be walked alone. Spring wind swept through the garden, carrying the scent of blooms and the whisper of something deeper, that love may not be magic, but it is powerful enough to heal what once seemed unfixable. Not long after the wedding, as life gently settled into a new rhythm, Nathan and Claire began to look further ahead. They realized their love wasn't meant to be just a happy ending, but the beginning of something greater. It was in their familiar kitchen over afternoon tea that Nathan first voiced the idea. "I once had everything and still felt empty, but fighting for my life taught me that the most valuable thing isn't what we own, it's who we share it with." Claire nodded silently. During those long hours waiting outside the operating room, she had met many families, people from far away, with no place to stay, burdened by both financial stress and emotional despair. That's when the vision took shape, a nonprofit foundation named the Hail Heart Initiative, created to support heart patients and their families, especially those facing financial hardship. Their first project was Claire's House, a free lodging facility for relatives of heart patients undergoing long-term treatment at the city's central hospital. Nathan funded most of the construction and operations, while Claire, with her medical background and empathetic heart, stepped in as lead coordinator. She designed a dual support model. On one hand, a clean, fully equipped facility located just minutes from the hospital. On the other, a space for emotional care where families could feel heard, supported, and never alone. Every Saturday afternoon, Claire organized small group sessions, inviting psychologists and physicians to speak. Over time, they created a warm, resilient community among people who had once arrived as strangers, but found unity in shared worry and hope. A small corner of the courtyard was transformed into a garden where family members could plant a flower or a tree in honor of their loved one, a living symbol of prayer. Claire often took children there, teaching them how to water plants as a quiet way of nurturing hope. When Claire's house was officially opened, there were no red ribbons or grand speeches, just a circle of people holding hands in a garden, knowing that they were no longer alone. Nathan held Claire's hand tightly, his eyes misty as he read the inscription above the entrance gate. Claire's House, where love keeps healing. Nightfall blanketed the garden in silver light. The moon hung low and soft, casting a quiet glow over the winding paths. Nathan and Claire sat side by side on the old bench beneath the maple tree, the very spot where they first truly saw each other beyond the surface. They said nothing at first, just sat still, letting the sounds of night fill the air around them. After everything, words were no longer needed to understand. Nathan spoke first. "I still remember the first time you came here, the way you looked at this house, with caution, but also determination. And I thought, this is just another person passing through." Claire smiled. "And yet I stayed." They looked up at the swaying leaves, touched by moonlight. "I never thought I'd fall in love again, let alone love this deeply. And you came, just when I had nothing left to lose." "Same for me, Nathan. I didn't come here to find love. I came to do my job, to care for a patient. But then you taught me something." "What did I teach you?" Claire smiled gently and gave his hand a small squeeze. "That sometimes love doesn't come to be found. It comes to save us." They fell silent again, leaning into each other as memories played like soft film reels. The quiet blood pressure checks, that first morning tea, the night in the hospital when he whispered, "Thank you for not leaving." Now they were here, healthy, in love, and truly alive. Nathan held her hand a little tighter. "You gave me a second life, Claire." She turned to him, her eyes full of a tenderness that needed no name. "No, Nathan, it was love that did that." Above them, the moon continued to shine. And beneath the tree, two souls who had once carried pain, who had survived the edge of loss, now rested in stillness, whole and at peace. They didn't need to say anything else. The silence between them spoke of everything they had endured and everything they still hoped to become. Because love doesn't need a reason. It doesn't wait for the perfect time. It arrives quietly, exactly when we're brave enough to live again.